to the Rapid Response series of Local Foods College. We have really been thrilled to be able to come together quickly here and offer a session of Local Foods College to address the many questions that are coming up for local growers around COVID-19 and how we can quickly respond to adapt on our farms, at our farmers markets, to be able to continue to produce healthy and fresh food for people in our communities. And thank you all for the work that you are doing around that. I am absolutely delighted to introduce Kathy Zeman, the Executive Director of the Minnesota Farmers Market Association. Kathy started working with MFMA in September of 2012. She also runs the Simple Harvest Farm Organics in Nerstrand, and occasionally sells at the Riverwalk Market Fair in Northfield. Kathy has spent most of her career in agriculture and brings those connections to MFMA, which has helped to build strong collaborations with diverse groups and pave the way for successful public policy efforts. And I'll just add that Kathy Zeman is an expert and someone looked to not just for her work in Minnesota, but around the country for the way that she's really provided leadership and helped to navigate the regulatory landscape for farmers markets. And last but not least, Kathy's favorite vegetable is any green leafy vegetable. Yum. But her all-time favorite food is milk. So with no further ado, I will hand it over to Kathy. You can go ahead and share your screen.
Hey folks, can everyone hear me? Hand wave if you can hear me. Yes.
Yep.
Nodding of your heads works. Okay, good job. All right. Since I feel like I've given this presentation 5.2 million times in the last week or so, is there anything, chime in, is there anything in particular that you folks would like to hear about today? Any burning question you really need to have answered? I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the chat. I can't see the chat once I do this. It goes away. Anything in the chat that
I can read a few things. So there's a question about using a food truck for a farmer's market pop-up. Sample SOPs. Do we have any definite guidelines at this point for markets? I assume regarding whether they're allowed and food safety concerns.
Okay. Well, then that helps immensely. So I built really our presentation today off of our website because this has got the most current information and it changes often. So even the tagline right now in my email says, it's in small print and italics and it's got a wee bit of sarcasm to it, but it says, during COVID-19, the contents of this email may expire in 30 minutes, which I'm not kidding. Things are pretty fluid and pretty quick. So we built our website. At the top of our website, you click there and you're going to go to our COVID-19 informational page. And it starts with the fact March 16th with Governor Walz's Executive Order 20-04. I think he's up to 27 or 28 executive orders by now, maybe 29, but this was the fourth one. And that's the one that did shut down any eating place where people gathered. So again, COVID-19 is not a foodborne illness, but it definitely is. It's just like a livestock nose to nose. When I say nose to nose with cattle, that's how that disease, it's when people gather and it's the droplets in the air. So we're trying to, you think big picture about trying not to spread this disease. You just have to keep people away from each other. And in that initial version of that, it only said the word markets. And so we did reach out to our Commissioner of Agriculture, Tom Peterson, and he did get confirmation from the governor attorneys that yes, farmers markets are okay to stay open as long as we do a number of things. So no on-site food consumption, which would mean no food sampling, Your food sample, that'll be on site. And we need to practice 6 feet of separation. So we stand 6 feet away from each other, which apparently nobody knows what 6 feet looks like anymore. So we'll have to practice that. And then they're encouraging hand washing stations. They did not say it had to be with goat milk soap, but try to do some kind of soap. And then, Noel, yes, I sell goat milk soap because I have goats. And what was it? There was another one in there. So no on food, food sampling would be banned. So and that's what you find here on this page. And then if you click the guidance for markets, this is the compilation of all of the information that we have gathered throughout the US and beyond, and have got concurrence with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture and the Minnesota Department of Health. So these are the things that work in Minnesota. There are a number of things that have been talked about across the US, but they don't necessarily fit Minnesota. So this is what fits for us here in the US. And it is, this is, again, talks about our executive order that, yes, the drive-throughs, that was the other thing. We're recommending, if you can, do a drive-through to help people flow quickly through your market. That was the other part of that executive order and recommendations from MDA. And folks, I want you to know, it's a good day to be a Minnesotan, because it's during this pandemic, the way that all of the groups have worked together, the University of Minnesota Extension, the University of Minnesota, the Minnesota Department of Health, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, the fact that the governor's office knows to reach out and touch Minnesota farmers markets, this is a pretty cool state right now. And so be thankful that we live where we do, because there's a lot of folks working together to keep all of us happy and healthy as much as possible under the pandemic. So, and then this goes into all the guidance for the markets. These, if these are all suggestions, if it is the law, we'll say must. If it's not the law, then it'll say you should, or we recommend. And we talked through all of that. The right-hand side, the green, refers to the food access programs that we can try to do during the COVID. And then you get down here, here's your sanitation guidelines for the markets and the vendors. We are following, we do not, there's 0 degrees of separation between the CDC, the MDH, and us. So we are not gonna make up anything. We're going to follow those recommendations. We have been pushed hard by many of our folks saying, oh, but how often should we sanitize? And I can make up something for us to make us feel comfortable, but there isn't any guidelines on that. If you click through, for instance, to this CDC clean and disinfect hand fact sheet, it does say bleach really is your most efficient way to sanitize. It also says that whatever you're sanitizing needs to stay wet for 1 minute. I tend to use a lot of hydrogen peroxide on my farm because hydrogen peroxide is a little bit easier on the environment. But if I'm going to use that in this situation, before that surface would be sanitized, it would take 4 minutes. So under COVID-19, I think the faster way to disinfect would be using bleach, and that's what we're following under that. Here's guidance, and on the right-hand side for your market and vendor workforce. Again, it just talks you through, if you're sick, don't show up. If your workers are sick, don't show up. And then we've got PDFs to download there. And I'm going to go back then one screen.
Kathy, would this be a good time to jump in with a couple of questions?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, so there's a question about whether there are guidelines for customers.
The guidelines for the customers, yes, and that's coming in the FAQs here. So customers need to stay 6 feet apart. And so so that is up to us, the markets, to figure that out. Somebody also in one of our other calls had mentioned that, a lot of some of the grocery stores, so we're in the same bucket as grocery stores, right? Farmers markets provide food. Therefore, we need to stay open. And not only for our customers, but to keep our farmers and our food maker vendors sustainable throughout this. So we provide food, so we're essential services. And so are grocery stores. Some grocery stores are doing a phenomenal job, right, of limiting the number of people in the store at one time. They've got tape all over their aisles every 6 feet so that they're helping customers figure that out. A couple of the gardening centers that Governor Walz is allowing to open during this next phase of the lockout, they're going to try to set it up so the people traffic all flows in one way. So you don't have cross patterns of people. They're all flowing the same way. All of that, we market managers and markets have to train our customers to do. So it's on us to help our customers do that. So this is when it's good to be a bossy person in your market. So somebody's going to be bossing people gently, nicely, because we're going to need a lot of grace to get through this. But people need to stay 6 feet apart. So it's on us to train our customers. So we posted a couple, I think I forgot which page. It's coming soon. Kim will add to the bucket list down here, coming soon. Some of the messaging that some of the markets are already doing, like Mill City fortunately, we're in Minnesota, right? So not a lot of markets have started yet, but we've got a handful. Faribault, Mill City in Minneapolis, the St. Paul markets, Maple Grove will start on April 16th. So they've already started that messaging to their customers, and the highlights are, this is not the time. If you normally shop with your family, this time don't. Just send one person in. So we're not going to be Minnesotan this year. We're going to need to be efficient. So we're not going to hug each other. We're not going to talk. And remember, Minnesotans are really good at saying goodbye 20 times before we actually say goodbye. This year, we're going to do it once. And then, so you're going to get your stuff and go home. You can be pleasant, but this is not the time to congregate with people. And the reason that it's really critical that farmers markets get it right is because in a grocery store, all of that activity is hidden behind walls, right? Our farmers markets are out in the middle of nowhere where people can see us from 360 degrees. And so it's really incumbent upon us to work really hard at keeping our customers. And some of that's just your layout. If you're in a physical location that you can stretch your vendor stalls out, so you've got at least 6 feet between each vendor stall. You can do more than that, great. And it's not so much that the vendors are worried, but it helps stretch your customers out. So yes, there's a whole section in here that's, I think Kim will upload it yet tonight, on just emails that you can send to your customers. You can put it on so if you don't have a good email list with your customers, get it to your vendors. They might have email lists for your customers, right? A lot of your vendors have those. Put it on your Facebook page. You can always do that. You can tweet it out. You can Instagram it out. There will be many of those. All right. Next question, Noelle.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. So we have a couple questions about non-food vendors or activities like music or yoga. What's the status of those?
So there's no regulation against them at all. That would all be part of the normal farmers market. Our recommendation is that you do not do those this year. Because if you're going to do an educational thing, you've typically done educational things or music. Typically, that's people gathering together. There's not enough room to have people gather together 6 feet apart. So we're recommending you don't do that. There are markets that are already saying they are not going to offer Power of Produce, the POP programs, even though that is critical because that's really where the new customers for markets are. Ron Branch is on this call. He had a great idea, maybe doing something virtually online. Marilyn said something about what if we did a weekly during market, somebody read a book about vegetables or fruits or something. So I think we can get creative and trying to keep our kids involved. So that was that group. So there's no regulation against it, but we're highly recommending you don't do that. You do everything you can to keep people far apart. Now to go to the vendor list, that's up to your market. Some markets are saying because they might be squashed on space and they can't stretch out their market enough if they let everybody in, they're saying, no, we'll only let food farmers, food makers, and then probably body care products that are made out of a farm product, goat milk, soap, goat lotion, something like that, or soap that you're making with your herbs. But other markets are saying, nope, they've got enough space. They could let those artists in, because remember, those artists need to make money too, right? Or the crafts. And if that's their summer money that gets them groceries for a couple of months, then so it's really up to the market to make that decision, and just make the best decision you can based on how big you can get your market. So if you think about a layout on a market, this might be the year that you ask your city to maybe block off a block or so you can use a street. You can just stretch out more. If you're in a parking lot, try to get even bigger in a parking lot. If you're not, so I'm thinking about Mill City Farmers Market. I think it's a 4-hour market, and they typically in the summer have 4,000 customers go through. Well, if you think about throughput, if you have a 4-hour market, 4,000 people, whoa, that is 1,000 people per hour, right? Well, what if you did a 6-hour market? Now you've driven your throughput down to people, so you're not quite at 1,000. Maybe you're at 800 or 700. That still seems to be a lot of people, right? So either think about increasing your location or increasing your hours so that you can let people go through. The other thing that you might want to think about there is to rope off your market, literally rope off your market. Maple Grove is going to test that next Thursday, the 16th. They're going to only have one entrance. So you walk in the one entrance, there's hand washing stations, you're going to wash your hands, they're going to gate people around a circle, and they're going to come back out the same way, so they keep traffic going in the same direction. In that case, if they're going to do that, they could limit the number of people in their market at one time. And of course, people have been pretty ingenious about, well, you could do rope, or you could do the cute orange snow fence, or the green snow fence, or the black snow fence. It depends on what you think your people need or whatever. So you keep that all in mind. So no regulation against it. It's all how you're going to manage your community. Okay.
Thanks, Kathy. So there's some chatter about live music, and that it's probably best to discourage people to linger. Is that your thought on that? Okay, I see a nod.
Yes, again, no regulation against it. Your key, so if you think of the overarching theme here, do not let your people congregate. It is time, this is the time to grab and go. It is so un-Minnesotan, I get that, but this is not the year. You just need people, and if you can pre-order, maybe your customers can pre-order with your vendors so they know exactly. It also helps your vendors out. The vendors then won't make more or bring more, right? They might not make too much. They'll maybe be able to make just what they need, especially I'm thinking of the food making vendors. But yeah, there's congregating of people is not a good thing this year.
Kathy, I know you mentioned the power of produce or the Pop Club, but if you could talk a little bit more about that, and then also SNAP EBT.
I'm going to pivot. I'm pretty sure David Nicholson is on this call. And David is really our SNAP guru. So David, if you wanted to jump in here too and offer some words of advice as we work together as this team of trying to figure out SNAP and how we're going to do it.
Kathy, do you want to go first with POP?
Sure. So I'll take on POP. So power produce. I don't know how you're going to efficiently do it this year, because typically those families will come in with the kids, right? And they're all together in a big group. So if you think about how big that group is, now you've got to limit, you've got to keep people 6 feet away from that group. I'm not, and this is the time of this time, we would discourage letting any of your customers, including your POP customers, reach across the table and touch, right? Oh, and touch that cucumber. Oh, I don't want that cucumber. I want this cucumber. So that multiple hand touching of everything, this is not the year to allow that to happen. St. Paul Farmers Market, David Katsonis, the director there, he successfully piloted the vendor and then an empty table in front of the vendor, creating another 2.5 to 3 feet. And that empty table is where the vendor then puts the product, and then the customer just picks it up. And on that empty table is where the money exchange happens. But it just reduces the amount of times that hands can touch things. If you think you can do that with Power Produce and still get those young folks in your market, to date, no one has come up with a really good solution yet. That's why we're having these calls, right, in our webinars, somebody will discover something, but this could be the year that we don't have that in-person happen. It might have to be virtual. So that's what I can tell you about the power of produce.
Yeah, I want to second what Kathy says about POP, just to say, in my mind, anything that reduces customer density and the duration of customer visits, to me, it behooves markets to do anything that meets that meets those two criteria. As far as SNAP EBT goes, I can't see anything that poses special risk in continuing to accept SNAP EBT, number one. Number two, it seems to me that markets are probably at least as safe, if not safer, for people to shop in as conventional food stores. So that's a reason to leave markets open for people who might be the most vulnerable people. And the third reason is that it seems likely to me that there will be a substantial increase in the number of SNAP participants in the coming months. And farmers markets are in a great position to play a strong role in meeting the nutritional needs of those individuals and families. So I think that there are actionable steps that can be taken to minimize any additional risk if there is additional risk. And I would strongly encourage markets to continue accepting SNAP EBT. I would be very open to hearing other people's comments, concerns, or any differences with what I just said about SNAP EBT, but at least that's my position.
And
Thanks,
if I
David.
could, I'll add to David's. Remember that the law says that if the market is open and you have a SNAP machine, you do have to offer SNAP. So it really, we just need to come up with the best practices, whether it's, you never want to sanitize, you never want to spray your machine with bleach water because you'll wreck your machine. But you certainly could put a little plastic bag over it and let, or sanitize or put gloves on or have the customer have gloves. I mean, there's a lot of ways we can work around that. Although really, Annalisa Holtberg, who's from the University of Minnesota Extension, she talked on this college on Tuesday. Again, remember the possibility that you can pick up the virus from surfaces. It is possible, but the probability is fairly low. So if we do a good job of scheduling when and how you're going to sanitize, like we have up here in our guidance, sanitizing guidance down here on do all of this, schedule it so it gets done on a scheduled basis. I think we're going to be fine on that. It's just the person-to-person interaction, but you do have to offer it.
How about tokens? Could you address the issues with tokens?
Well, we know that UCLA says that the virus is viable on a plastic or metal for 72 hours. On paper, it's 24. So if your market is once a week, time alone will make that virus die.
Yeah,
You could
I would jump in to
David,
say, based on what I've seen from those same studies or how I understand them, the fall off of the active virus on any of those materials is precipitous. So does the virus last on metal for 5 days? Sure. Is there enough of a viral load on metal after 3 days to make a huge difference? Probably not, especially if people are following the guidance, the main guidance that we keep hearing over and over again. Keep your hands clean. Don't touch your hands to your face. And then do the other things, which include, maintaining good distance. I am a huge fan of David Katsonis's plan to put additional tables in front of vendor displays to reduce the social awkwardness, but also, help for customers like me who are very forgetful, to help them stay away. And that goes for the EBT booth as well. There's no reason not to try to maintain that distance to the extent possible in front of your EBT booth.
I mean, you might want to play some waltz music, right? By the EBT machine. And so the SNAP participant walks up, and so the the booth person walks back, and then the SNAP person does their thing, and then they walk back. And I mean, there's that, it's that interaction that you want to keep separate as much as possible. So the physical things I don't think are as critical as keeping people apart, if at all possible. And have I heard that many markets now, I can't wait until somebody designs their own, you know, the St. Paul Farmers Market face mask with the St. Paul Farmers Market logo on the mask. And I do think that will happen. We'll have some creative ways to have people wear masks. And then we do not yet, someone had asked earlier on one of these webinars about the right kind of gloves to wear, and we do not have a good answer on that yet, because some gloves actually have some allergens in them that folks that are allergic to some food products it would be critical they didn't touch. So we don't have a good answer on that yet, but it's coming. So keep checking back.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. And thanks, David, for jumping in as well. That was really helpful. So someone has asked the $30,000 question here of, should we plan on these regulations extending throughout the entire season? Thoughts on that?
I think that should be your plan. So I think your plan should be, you should have a norm. Says
I think she froze up on us. Kathy, can you hear us?
All right. Well, I think that we lost Kathy, and we will try and get her back on here.
Let's just give her a minute. Oh, yep, she jumped off. Let's just give her a minute to log back in.
Okay.
This is a
I'm
super
sure
important topic.
we could work with her to call in too if needed.
Yep.
Well, this is Martha Archer from Mill City Farmers Market. I can kind of finish since Kathy and I have been tag teaming on this talk. I think that we should expect to continue this throughout the season and be poised to lighten up, should that be an option. But everybody needs to plan, and so planning for the worst case right now, and managing to that, knowing that loosening up is going back to what we know how to do, is how most of us are moving forward.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Martha. I'm wondering, would you like me to keep sharing some of these questions with you, or maybe you could give us a summary of how Mill City is adapting right now?
Sure, I'm happy to answer questions as well. Yeah, so we had winter markets pre-scheduled for every other week, and pivoted quickly on March 13th, and again with the governor and Commissioner Peterson's approval to move to a pre-order pickup market to really control the number of customers and keep it organized. So we went from what was usually 40 vendors indoors to 11 vendors the first week, and we scaled up on April 4th to 23 vendors. The first week we had 160 orders. We scaled up to 320 orders, which was about 450 people on site versus our typical 1,200 people on site. Most of those people were coming just a single grocery shopper. So getting rid of the rest of the family, and really focusing on just the grocery shopper. We did something a little different than Rochester. Rochester is aggregating their orders. We had each vendor create their own online store and their own assortment online. And often it was a CSA type, buy 5 cheeses and kind of stock up, since it was only going to be every other week. And the vendors saw really terrific sales. Not to the level of their normal winter market, but they were thrilled to have the option. We surveyed customers. Customers felt very safe and comfortable. So it went well. We will be scaling that up one more time on April 18th, same way, just online pre-orders, and then opening up in May as a combination of pre-orders and an open marketplace.
Great. Thank you,
West.
Martha.
Back
And
with us, Kathy.
welcome back, Kathy.
No, yay, rural Minnesota, right? With all the
Right.
weather problems. Oofda. All right. I literally had to use the cable to hook up. Then my internet is more stable. All
Okay.
right. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I can jump back in. This may have already been answered, but I don't think it hurts to just restate. So there's a comment. Riverwalk Market Fair also has food artisan and art vendors. Obviously, this month these vendors would not be essential. However, we run June through October. If there are still regulations for non-essentials, will our market be able to have non-food vendors at all?
Yes, you can. There's no regulation against the vendors, right? That is up to the markets to make that decision. Right now, your markets can have artists and craft people and plants. One market's going to do just plant sales, that's all fine under the farmers market. If you think about a grocery store, they sell toilet paper. They used to sell toilet paper. Now they don't have any left. But so the same thing about a farmer's market. There's no regulation against any particular vendor at all. You can let them in. There's no problem. It really is. So April, in your case, you're around Central Park, right? So if you didn't think that, if you think you have too many vendors and you can't spread out enough to get so that you got your people spread out enough, then you might say, okay, we're going to only start with our food vendors and see how we can manage the crowd. And then if we think we can manage the crowd, then you could bring back your artist vendors and your craft vendors, but there's no regulation against that. Whatever you've done in the past, you can do now.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. That clarifies.
You're welcome.
All right. I will share a comment here from Marilyn. If a market has a Facebook page, vendors could list veggies available. Power of Produce could put a wish list for a child to choose from. The adult could pick up the tokens as well as make the child's choice. Maybe issuing monthly pop tokens rather than each market day. So some ideas on workarounds for the Power of Produce Club. Any thoughts or reactions to those comments?
Those are good ideas. And try them, try them out. I don't, there's not going to be, we're going to have to try a lot of these things. I don't think anybody's got the whole best answer yet, but there's a lot of people in this US that are. Someone had asked that question before about guidance for their customers. So on the right-hand side of the screen, this is what Maple Grove did. This is really for their customers. So you could mimic something like this. I'm sure, Martha, that you've got something too, right? That you sent out to yours.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
And it's updating. It'll expire. I like that. It'll expire in 30 minutes.
So there's a question on protective equipment. Is anything required as of right now?
It would be just following the CDC recommendations. Again, we're going to follow CDC and MDH. So if the Minnesota Department of Health says that everybody should have gloves and face masks, then we would follow the same thing. And I think now it's a recommendation, but it's not required.
Great, thank you. There is a comment here from David, and David, if you'd like to speak to this, that'd be great. But David is saying, Rachel Holmes, MFMA, others, and I will be preparing additional resources and templates for markets interested in using a receipt-based system to allow people to shop with SNAP rather than a token system. Thanks for that, David. And would you like to share anything else about transitioning to a receipt-based system?
Nothing to add at the moment. I know Maple Grove is looking at a system like that. Martha, you kind of used a system like that at Mill City, didn't you?
We did for our pre-order pickup markets, yes. And we're going to go back to tokens. It's scalable. So we use like a little guest receipt, like a diner receipt to give a receipt to our vendors when they cash their tokens back in, and we were just handing the EBT customer that receipt for payment to the vendor, and then we would pay them instead of having the tokens go back and forth. But that will restrict the EBT customer in how many vendors they can shop from, and we just feel like we need to go back to tokens, and that it is that we can put small baggies full of $10 tokens together and have minimal hand and contact with them, and then quarantine them all for a week in between markets. So it's the most efficient and scalable model, is just to go back to tokens.
Oh, so Martha, you're going to kind of pre-package some of your tokens so you're not touching all of them. You can do
yeah,
bags
it's good. My staff is thrilled about it
Yeah.
because they count those wooden nickels all day long. So if they're pre-packaged, it's going to use a lot of plastic, but hopefully we can reuse that plastic.
See, I'm wondering if that isn't one of the things that we try that hangs around. Like we'll find some efficiencies. The silver lining of this pandemic, we'll find some efficiencies.
And
Well,
I just
go ahead.
Martha, I agree with you that a receipt-based system isn't going to work for markets that have a really high volume of customer traffic. It'll only be put out there as an option for those markets for which it seems like.
Oh yeah, I think it's a great option, David. Yeah.
But I agree with you entirely that it's not a great fit for everyone.
I'm just getting ready to scale to much bigger numbers.
Yep.
All right, so Kathy referenced silver linings. So Carl has kind of a silver lining type question. Do we have the opportunity here to make farmers markets the standard go-to place for groceries for more people?
Well, that's a nice segue into our 1 o'clock call where we put Karen Lanthier on the spot from Minnesota Growing, and she said their team has already been talking about this. So what if this is, so we don't want to lose the good message that already is happening in the state of Minnesota, right? As for the first time ever, some grocery store shelves were empty. There's plenty of food in the state of Minnesota, but in a quick turnaround time, there were distribution problems, right? There's plenty of food. But when those grocery store shelves got a little skinny, a lot of people turned to their local farmers. And so a lot of our local farmers that have bread, meat, eggs, cheese, they are selling out. And when this pandemic is done, we don't want to lose that, right? We don't want our customers to forget that those local farmers are there. The state of Minnesota, we've got enough local food farmers that we can feed this state for many, many months. And so I think that is the campaign, the marketing campaign that we'll try to hang on to. There will be people that are much more fluent than I am, right, to craft that message. But Carl, you're exactly right. We are going to try to take advantage of this situation where many of our customers, for the first time ever, found out that we really have a lot of local food farmers, and hang on to that and go forward. So I would expect that message to come out strong. We'll probably tie it in. We should all try to tie it into our National Farmers Market Week celebration, right? It's always that first week in August, and then ride that, and then continue that into 2021 and 2022. So to not let this one get away from us. Excellent question.
Great. There's been a little back and forth in the chat on gloves or no gloves. What's really the best strategy there?
According to the CDC, and then of course the Minnesota Department of Health, gloves can sometimes give a false sense of security, right? That people will think that because you have gloves on, you're not transferring anything. And yet we've seen the University of Minnesota Extension, Suzanne Dreesen, food safety team, if your hands are not clean when you put the glove on, all you did was transfer your germs onto the glove. And she's done that with that glow germ, right? When you put the blue light on. So you still would have to wash your hands. Then you're going to put your gloves on. You would have to change gloves often, right? Between transactions. So, again, it goes back to the theory that the probability of picking up this virus on surfaces is a little bit lower than it is higher. And remember, I've seen people rub their nose, right? They put even with gloves on, people can do that. So this is still going back to wash your hands, then you could use gloves, and then you're going to transfer them out often because your gloves can get contaminated.
Great. So there, how about farmers who might be wrestling with that do maybe a mix of marketing channels and are trying to figure out if they shift more to CSA than some of these direct marketing, or CSA is direct marketing as well, but versus farmers markets. Do you have any opinions on that?
I do. And I'm really going to quote Ryan Pesch. So Ryan Pesch is the University of Minnesota Extension. I don't know exactly what his title is, but I always call him the AggieCon guy. So Ryan's message of having multiple sales channels really plays out during this pandemic. So we had a number of farmers, right, that had the majority of their sales to restaurants. So what happened to their farm income? Within 2 weeks, it crashed because all the restaurants closed. So this is the time to have multiple sales channels. So the lesson is, you learned that this year. You don't want to have 80% of your sales in restaurants or 80% of your sales to schools, right? You want to have some on-farm, some farmers market, some wholesale, some retail. That is the way to survive this. If you want to take a look at when you have a single market, look at your commodity farmers. If all you sell is corn, soybean, right? Then you are reliant on one market, and that is controlled by the government and the CME. So to have multiple sales channels will make you the most resilient in any market, but in particular in this market, it will be to all of our farmers' advantage and all of our food vendors' advantage to have multiple sales channels.
How about there's a question or a comment on virtual markets like northcircleonline.org. Any comments on virtual markets, Kathy?
You mean just having an online market?
Yes.
Early in March, we did a survey to our vendors. We know that farmers markets don't exist without our vendors, right? So we did a quick survey statewide, and we had over 300 of our vendors reply. And out of those 300 vendors, about a quarter of them already are selling online on some kind of an online sales platform, but the other 3/4 indicated they were not, or at least they were doing marketing kind of on Facebook pages, but so a quarter of them have an online store. When COVID hit, when they first hit, some markets canceled that market that weekend because they weren't really sure what to do yet, right? Those farmers immediately could pivot and just email their customers, and they came up with their own, we'll meet you here. They kind of came up with their own drive-through or their own pickup. So they stayed solvent. They did not blink. So does that work? Sure. Again, it's just another sales channel. That's what you want to think about. So Katie Myrie, so 2 weeks ago on this college, Katie and Hannah did that session. Go back and check, go back and pick up that video that Noelle, you got on your website. They talk people through that very nicely, how there's sales channels and sales strategies. And and then I would say what Ryan says, you have to have many different sales channels.
Great. Well, we're coming close to the end of our list of questions, so please keep those questions coming if you still have them. But I'll take a moment to just share a couple comments that have been made. So around the power of produce, there's a comment that if the parent does the shopping, then it kind of defeats the purpose. Okay, we hear you there. There is a comment from David again that he's hopeful that in designing any campaign promoting markets during this time, that there is a strong message about many farmers markets being places at which food assistance can be used. So some of that kind of inclusive messaging around that. There's a comment about wanting to see organized regional efforts of small local food producers. So those are just some of the comments that have come through. And I see another question here, so I'll jump to that. We're thinking about not allowing dogs this season. Is that a good idea?
Okay, so this is good. We've created we've been asked for this for a number of years. So now we finally got our 14-page document on our website that says, these are the legal requirements. If you're a market or a vendor in the state of Minnesota, this is what you have to know. And so we talk about sales tax, and we talk about the licenses you need, and we do bring up dogs because there's been some incredibly nice interpretation about dogs. So the law says that the dog cannot be in the food establishment, right? Unless you get an exemption or exclusion, which there are some, but not in farmers markets yet. So legally, dogs can be at your market as long as they're in the aisle between the stalls. They can't be so in this case, the MDH and the MDA would say that the stall is your food establishment. And so the dog cannot be in your stall, but you know, the aisle between the stalls, that's not actually part of the food establishment. So as far as the food licensing goes, that would be, you still could have a dog at the market. A bigger concern for pets at the market, however, is that they bite. So many markets will just say no dogs at our market because the dog could bite somebody, and then you've got a liability issue there. And I like that David put in there about now that our pets can catch the virus from us. So currently there's no regulation that says you shouldn't have dogs, but I think it might be a good recommendation this year to keep all pets at home. This would not be the year to let pets come to your market, but that's a recommendation. There's no regulation against it yet.
Great, and I'll just point out, David, thanks for sharing that resource in the chat about COVID-19 and pets. And thank you, Connie, who shared some information about groups working to develop online ordering platforms. So you can look to the chat and Connie's comment on that for more info. Well, we are coming to the end of our questions, unless, of course, I missed any, which is entirely possible. So if folks have any questions, please keep adding those to the chat. Otherwise, Kathy, have we covered everything, or are there any topics that you feel we should still address here?
Well, really, I think always we should have these discussions and make sure that we're really training whatever people want. So I think that from my perspective, as long as we've answered your questions, so, big picture, yes, farmers markets are legal. You should do them. You should make sure that you've given your platform to your vendors so that they can stay viable. We want people to keep making money because then they're part of a resilient community. That's a good thing. So, but then try all the solutions possible. And at a market, try to keep people 6 feet away and keep them moving forward. No touching of hands, no congregating of people. Other than that, yeah, big picture, just keep people that 6 feet away.
Great, thank you. There's a question, are we having another Zoom about the same topic next week? Kathy, could you just address kind of the recent webinars and any upcoming ones from MFMA?
We will, so MFMA hosts a Thursday at 1 o'clock. So every single Thursday at 1 o'clock, we've got an open Zoom forum. So you can just hop on. My intent is that they're probably about an hour long now. I can't wait until they're 5 minutes long, right? That means that we've solved a lot. And in those Zooms, we'll usually start them with information that we've gathered from our Department of Agriculture calls. Remember, I do those calls with Commissioner Peterson on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Mondays at 3, we have the Governor's Food Safety and Defense Task Force. So anything that's going on at the state level, we can bring those into that call. We'll start those calls and then any of our, any updates. So they're free, just hop on and we'll try to get, so our intent there is to share information and to squash any rumors, right? Because we only want to follow really what's truly in regulation, and then we'll do recommendations. And again, it's only April, so as farmers markets do things, in April and in May, we'll be able to test things, and then you should share. Yep, this worked really well, or that did not work, so let's not do that again. All right, so we're going to learn together. I mean, we've got over 300 farmers markets in this state. So between 300 farmers markets, we will find solutions that we can all live with, and then we'll share them and learn together.
Great. I thought of a question that I have actually. So being here in a border city, any special considerations with farmers markets that are, neighboring other states and maybe have vendors coming from different states? Anything that they need to consider?
If you're selling, anybody sells in the state of Minnesota, you have to follow Minnesota rules and laws. So that means cottage food. Yeah. So, and the same way, if we got border vendors, right, that are going into Dakotas or Iowa or Wisconsin, though you have to follow those state laws. So as long as, I would definitely grab our PDF off our site. I'll have Kim put it in a different place. That the document that we have now that lists so it talks about music, right? If you're going to play music, there's laws about that. There's laws about dogs, all the food licensing laws, cottage food. It's all on there now, so that helps us. And so that would be a good document to hand to any vendor, right? And every market might want to have that posted on their Facebook page. It just gives everybody the same set of rules that everybody has to follow in the state.
Great, thank you. Some accolades from Carl. You guys are rocking it. Way to go. Connie also shared some information about a session coming up through Local Foods College April 16th. And I'll give a recap of all the sessions coming up here in a moment. But that one is on MDA Wholesale and the Grocers Association. So I believe that we are reaching the end of our time here together. So
Connie, I'm being nosy. How many farmers responded to that survey with the grocers? Do you know off the top of your head? She might not be on. In the vendor surveys that we did, MDA asked us to ask our vendors, if you have a clean vehicle, could you help transport food in case we actually need to transport food to certain people? We had 87 vendors across this state that said, sure, we could pick up food and haul it if you need us to. So congratulations to Minnesota vendors. You've stepped up. MDA was almost, you could push them over with the feather. They were so happy and surprised that many vendors said, sure, we could do this for you. So that's nice.
Kathy, I didn't realize I could unmute myself. So this is Connie. And I've heard around 30 respondents to that MDA.
I was surprised that there were a handful in my Southeast Minnesota farmers that had not heard of it and they had lost market. So we changed the title of it to make it like, we literally said, did you lose a market? Do this. So maybe that will help pick up a few more, but I was kind of surprised that more weren't on there. So that's good though. If we can help 30 more farmers, find markets to replace them, that would be great.
Yeah, and the Minnesota grocers will have some great examples of stuff they've already seen happening in grocery stores to move local food onto the shelves. So I'm excited about this session. I met with them earlier this week, and we should have some good information for people.
Wouldn't that be phenomenal if this is a long-term solution, right? Like this should have been happening all along. So this is, again, silver lining.
Yeah, let's keep our eyes focused on hope. Yep.
Yeah. Good job.
Well, this is just great. Thank you, everyone, David, Martha, Connie, for just jumping into this. This has really been a great discussion. Any last comments from Kathy or any of the other folks who've chimed in? We have 4 more sessions coming up here, and we may keep adding them as topics are brought to our attention. So if there's something that you want to know more about right now, let us know, and we'll see if we can get some information out on that. But coming up next week, Ryan Pesch, who was already mentioned on the call, he'll be presenting about crop plans and alternative market outlets. So that'll be happening next Tuesday at 3 o'clock, followed by the session that was just discussed by Connie, the wholesale response to COVID-19. So check those out next week. And then the following week, April 21st, we'll have information on farm to rural grocery. RSDP has done great work around that. and then also employment concerns on small farms as well. So please continue to tune in, share about these. You can find this on Facebook as well as our website. You can share a tweet about us if you'd like to. And again, we'll be back here next Tuesday to talk about crop planning and alternative markets. So thank you all. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Anna, who does an amazing job keeping us organized and with the tech. And thank all of you for tuning in today and for your excellent questions. We'll see you guys back here next week.